God bless you, dear students. So, here we are with the third chapter, Across the Fence, which is written by John Boyne. And before starting the lesson, let's know something about the author. He is an Irish novelist. He is the author of 10 novels for adults and 5 for younger readers, including The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, which was made into a feature film. So, this extract is from the novel The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, set during the Holocaust. 8-year-old Bruno's father has been promoted as commandant of Auschwitz, and the family moves there. From the window of his room at the strange new place, Bruno sees people in the distance, but a tall fence cuts him off from them. His father, who tells him they are not really people, says he need not think about them. But Bruno is not convinced. While exploring his new environment, he meets Shamwal from the other side of the fence, who shares his birthday but has a very different life. The boys become friends. One day, Shamwal asks Bruno to help him find his missing father. Bruno, whose greatest wish is to be an explorer, agrees to cross the fence and help Shamwal. So now let's discuss about this chapter. So here I'm going to read the paragraphs and then you will get the explanation also. Shamwal was waiting for Bruno when he arrived for the first time. He wasn't sitting cross-legged on the ground and staring at the dust beneath him, but standing leaning against the fence. He held out his hands to Bruno, who opened his mouth in delight. Shamwal was carrying a pair of striped pajama bottoms, a striped pajama top and a striped cloth cap exactly like the one he was wearing. It didn't look particularly clean, but it was a disguise, and Bruno knew that good explorers always wore the right clothes. Okay, so Bruno is a 8-year-old boy and he lives with his parents and sister Gretel. And Bruno's father is promoted to commandant, and so their family has to move to Outwit. And so this Bruno is initially upset about moving to Outwit because of leaving his friends. Then from the house at Outwit, Bruno sees a camp in which the prisoners wear striped pajamas. So one day Bruno comes upon a fence that he follows until he sees a young boy sitting on the other side of the fence. And the shoeless boy is wearing striped pajamas and a cloth cap. And Bruno also notices that the boy is wearing an armband with a star on it. And both the boys become fast friends, and they discuss their families and where they are from, and they also share their birthday and age. And then Shamwal, he is wearing the dress. It is not looking particularly clean, as it was just a disguise, and this Bruno just thinks that the explorers always wear the right clothes. Okay, now let's see the further paragraph. You still want to help me find Papa? Asked Shamwal, and Bruno nodded quickly. Of course, he said, although finding Shamwal's Papa was not as important in his mind as the prospect of exploring the world on the other side of the fence. I wouldn't let you down. Shamwal lifted the bottom of the fence off the ground and handed the outfit to Bruno, being particularly careful not to let it touch the muddy ground below. "Thanks," said Bruno, wondering why he hadn't remembered to bring a bag to hold his own clothes in. Okay, so here prospect means opportunity. Okay, now his friend Shamwell asked for Bruno's help in finding his father. So for Bruno, it was the opportunity of just exploring the world on the other side of the fence. And so Shamwell helped Bruno by lifted the bottom of the fence, so Bruno may not touch the muddy ground below. And then Bruno thanked him, and just wondering that he forgot to bring a bag to hold his own clothes in. And so Shamwell gives him the prison clothing, means a strip pajama top and a cap which he has stolen for Bruno. Now, next paragraphs. "Well, turn round," said Bruno, pointing at his friend as he stood there awkwardly. "I don't want you watching me." Shamwell turned back just as Bruno applied the finishing touch to his costume, placing the strip cloth cap on his head. Shamwell blinked and shook his head. It was quite extraordinary, if it wasn't for the fact that Bruno was nowhere near as skinny as the boys on his side of the fence, and not quite so pale either. It would have been difficult to tell them apart. It was almost, Shamwell thought, as if they were all exactly the same, really. So to tell them apart means to recognize the differences between two similar things or people. Then Bruno said to his friend just not to watch him. Then this Shamwell turned and Bruno gave the finishing touch to his costume, and also put the stripped cloth cap on his head. So now they were looking exactly same, and it was difficult to recognize the differences between them. Okay, now do you know what this reminds me of? Asked Bruno, and Shamwell shook his head. What, he asked. It reminds me of grandmother, he said. You remember I told you about her, the one who died? Shamwell nodded. It reminds me of the plays she used to put on with Gretel and me, Bruno said, looking away from Shamwell as he remembered those days back in Berlin. Part of the very few memories now that refuse to fade. It reminds me of how she always had the right costume for me to wear. You wear the right outfit and you will feel like the person you are pretending to be. She always told me, I suppose that's what I'm doing, isn't it? Pretending to be a person from the other side of the fence. A Jew, you mean? Said Shamwell. Yes, said Bruno, shifting on his feet a little uncomfortably. That's right. Shamwell pointed at Bruno's feet and the heavy boots he had taken from the house. You will have to leave them behind too, he said. Bruno looked appalled. But the mud, he said. You can't expect me to go barefoot. You will be recognized otherwise, said Shamwell. You don't have any choice. Appalled means horrified, and barefoot means not wearing anything on your feet. Okay, so now Bruno tells Shamwell that it reminds him of his grandmother, the one who is already died. He adds that she believed that all you needed were the right clothes to feel like you were someone else. Then Shamwell responds by asking if Bruno means that he is pretending to be a Jew. Then Bruno agrees for it, and he shifting on his feet in not a comfortable way, as the boots were very heavy, which he had taken from the house. So Shambhal said to leave the boots behind. And now this Bruno just looked horrified, as he don't want to accept the just to go barefoot in the mud. Okay, now next. Bruno sighed, but he knew that his friend was right. He took off the boots and his socks and left them beside the pile of clothes on the ground. At first it felt horrible, putting his bare feet into so much mud. They sank down onto his ankles, and every time he lifted a foot, it felt worse, but then he started to rather enjoy it. Shambhal reached down and lifted the base of the fence, but it only lifted to a certain height, and Bruno had no choice but to roll under it, getting his striped pajamas completely covered in mud as he did so. He laughed when he looked down at himself. He had never been so filthy in all his life. It felt wonderful. Now, this Bruno know that his friend is right, so he take off the boots and socks and left them beside the pile of clothes on the ground. And at first he feels horrible while putting his bare feet into the mud, and also he feels worse, but soon he starts enjoy it. And after that, Shambhal lifts the base of the fence, and Bruno roll under it, and his stripped pajamas completely covered in mud. And when he looks down, he laughs at himself, as he had never been so dirty. So it feels wonderful. Okay, now the next paragraph. Shambhal smiled too, and the two boys stood awkwardly together for a moment, unaccustomed to being on the same side of the fence. Unaccustomed means not used to. Bruno had an urge to give Shambhal a hug, just to let him know how much he liked him and how much he had enjoyed talking to him over the last year. Shambhal had an urge to give Bruno a hug too, just to thank him for all his many kindnesses and his gifts of food, and the fact that he was going to help him find Papa. Neither of them did hug each other though, and instead they began the walk away from the fence and towards the camp. Okay, so by seeing it, Shambhal also smiled, and both these boys just moved in a way together for a moment, and as it is not used to be on the same side of the fence. And Bruno had a strong desire also to give Shambhal a hug, as to let him know that how much he likes Shambhal. And over the last year he also had enjoyed talking to Shambhal. And then this Shambhal also had a strong desire to give a hug to Bruno, as he just want to thank him for his kindness to help him find his father and the gifts of food. And although they did not hug each other, but they walk away from there towards the fence. Now, it didn't take long to get where they were going. In one corner, Bruno could see 3 soldiers who seemed to be in charge of a group about 20 men, and they were shouting at them. Some of the men had fallen to their knees with their heads in their hands. In another corner, he could see more soldiers standing around and laughing and looking down the barrels of their guns, aiming them in random directions but not firing them. In fact, everywhere he looked, all he could see was 2 different types of people, either happy, laughing, shouting soldiers in their uniforms, or unhappy crying people in their striped pajamas. I don't think I like it here, said Bruno after a while. Neither do I, said Samuel. I think I ought to go home, said Bruno. So then here Bruno saw that there were only two types of people across the fence. The first was the soldiers who were happy, laughing and aiming their guns but not firing them. And the second type was the people in striped pajamas who were unhappy and always seemed sad. So both the boys didn't like it, and Bruno thought to go home. Okay, so for today this much story is enough. Hope you all understand it. And now as your homework, just memorize the taught part of the story and learn the word meanings. And children, your unit test syllabus is chapter 1, the adventure of the speckled Ben, and one poem, whose place is it anyway. But I will also continue with the further chapters. Now in the next video we will meet with the remaining part of the story along with the question and answers. So till then, be safe and all the best.